Let's learn about inequality and 3 myths surrounding this topic that you won't hear elsewhere. Myth number 1. Profit and plunder are the same thing. Imagine a person who provides services to society. Maybe he mows lawns, or fixes cars, or paints houses, and in return for these services he provides to others, he asks for something in return, maybe some food, clothing and shelter. Now, suppose it's the case that the society values what this person provides tremendously, maybe because these are things that society really needs, or maybe because there are very few people who are able to do these things. But, for whatever reason, society places a great value on the things this person contributes. And let's suppose, also, that society places a relatively low value on the things that he asks for in return. Perhaps it's because these things are easy to produce. There's lots of them laying around. For whatever reason, imagine that society places a low value on the resources this person asks for in exchange. We would look at this person and say, this is a person who we would like to have. He contributes more to society than he asks for in return. But, now take this person and impose on top of him a monetary system, where instead of exchanging the things he does for society's resources, he exchanges the things he does for money and uses the money to buy resources from others. This is what this would look like. The person provides value to society and society gives him dollars in return, and the dollars are commensurate with the value that society places on these things he offers. Society highly values the services, and so people are willing to pay him a lot of money for these services. And then in return, the person takes some of this money that he's earned, and he buys resources from society. And because society does not place a large value on the things he's asking for in return, they don't ask for much money for these. And so if you look at the system, what's happening is that the person is accumulating dollars. He will have more dollars coming in than there are dollars going out. We call this profit. Now, many people look at profit and say that profit is, in some sense, a bad thing because it represents something that someone is taking from society. But if you look at it in this context, profit is actually an indication that this person has done something good, that he has provided more value to others than he has asked for in exchange. And so as he provides this value and asks for things in exchange, he accumulates these dollar bills. We call them profit. Steve Jobs with $10 billion in the bank, and he's an example of this person. Where did Jobs come up with this $10 billion? He came up with the $10 billion because these people liked the things he was offering better than they liked the dollars in their pocket, and so they gave dollars to Steve Jobs and Steve Jobs gave iPhones to the people. This was the transaction. At the end, Steve Jobs dies with lots of money in the bank, but the world ends up with lots of iPhones as the other half of the exchange. Profit is not a sign that people need to give back to society. In fact, it's the reverse. Profit, when attained in a free market environment, is a sign that society actually owes the person more goods and services than he has already consumed. Now suppose, conversely, the person accumulates dollars not by offering goods and services to society, but instead by co-opting the government and using the force of government to take money from others and putting it in his own pocket. Then, in that case we have this kind of situation where the person just simply is using the force of government to take money from the people. The person then uses some of this money to buy goods and services, and maybe he has some left over. But this, although it looks like the same pile of dollar bills, we no longer call it profit. We now call it plunder, because although it's the same pile of dollar bills, how the person came about those dollar bills is very different. He did not come about them by offering someone something in free exchange for something else. Instead, he came about them by co-opting the power of government to take money from others. We have plenty of examples of this. The agricultural lobby lobbies government for things like ethanol requirements, despite the fact that there are many studies showing that ethanol is not necessarily good for the environment. It does not give you better gas mileage. It doesn't reduce our dependence on foreign oil, and yet big industries will lobby the government for ethanol requirements because these industries make their money from growing corn. And so what happens is, these large industries collect lots of money in exchange for providing people with nothing in return. This is the difference between profit and plunder. So myth number 1, profit and plunder are the same thing. The fact is, profit is good. It indicates someone is providing something for society. Plunder is not. It indicates that someone has actually taken something from society. Myth number 2, one can be for equality. You have seen this image before. 3 kids face equal opportunities, although unequal outcomes. Each one stands on a box. They have equality of opportunity, but because they are different heights, One can see the game and one can't. They have inequality of outcomes. These three kids face equality of outcome, but inequality of opportunity. One has 2 boxes. One has no boxes. Their opportunities are unequal. Despite the fact that all three can see the game, their outcome is equal. The moral of the story is, you cannot be for or against equality. You can only be for or against a particular combination of equality and inequality. If you are for equality of opportunity, then by definition, you are also against equality of outcome. And if you are for equality of outcome, then by definition, you are also against equality of opportunity. And the reason for this is because people are different. Some people are born smarter than others. Some people are born luckier than others. Some people are born faster or stronger than others. And because people are born into different circumstances, when we leave them alone, we give them equality of opportunity. Some will naturally rise higher than others and we will have inequality of outcomes. In fact, because people are different, the only way to achieve equality of outcome is to impose an inequality of opportunity to boost the people who are less smart, less skilled, less educated and hold back the people who are more. So myth number 2, one can be for equality. The fact is that equality and inequality are actually inseparable. We can only be for a combination. Myth number 3, we understand what equality means. These children are suffering, but they're not suffering because they're unequal. They're suffering because they're poor, and to the extent that we focus myopically on equality, we run a real risk of missing a real problem. The real problem being poverty. Look at these people. Let's suppose that the people on the left earn $30,000. These people earn $40,000. Those earn $60,000. And the people on the far right earn $70,000. We can look at this and we see that there's lots of inequality here. But imagine that these people are in different stages of their careers. The people on the left have just started their jobs. The people in the middle are mid-level career people. These are people, on the right, who have spent lots of time in the workforce. They've achieved lots of education, lots of experience, and commensurately high incomes. To the left of these people are students who are learning skills and preparing to enter the workforce. We have inequality here. And if I move time forward, you will see that this inequality persists. We always have inequality. People on the left earning less and people on the right earning more. However, over time each person has moved through each circle, and so each person has earned, over the course of his or her career, a total of $200,000. That is in this example. We have persistent inequality, and yet everyone is completely equal. That's not to say that there is no such thing as inequality in outcome. But it is to say that when we talk about inequality, we tend to take a snapshot. We look at the world and we see some people who are poor, some people who are middle class, and some people who are rich. And we say, look at the inequality, when the right way to do this is to look over time and watch over time how people move. Some from the poor to the rich, some of the rich move down to the poor. And if we look over time, we will still see inequality, but we will see markedly less than we see when we just take a snapshot. Steve Jobs, as we said, died with $10 billion in the bank and he got his money from people like Karen, who handed it over to him in exchange for iPhones. Now, when we talk about inequality, we focus on the flow of the dollars. We completely ignore the flow of the goods and services. Next time you're in a crowd of people, ask for a show of hands. How many people here have at least $50,000 in the bank? And you'll find very few hands going up. Then ask, how many people here have a smartphone? And you'll see every hand go up. Notice the difference. When we look at dollars, we will tend to see inequality, but if we look at the goods and services that arise in response to those dollars, we'll actually see tremendous equality. Economists measure inequality on the Gini index. 0 means everybody's equal. 1 means one person is incredibly rich and everybody else is destitute. The two most equal countries in the world are Sweden and Afghanistan. On the Gini index, they rank 0.25 and 0.27. In terms of planet Earth, this is as equal in income as countries can get. And yet, if you look at these two countries, what you will find is that the average income in Sweden is $54,000, while the average income in Afghanistan is $600. That is, equality doesn't necessarily mean that we're all well off. We can be equally miserable. So, problems with inequality. First, inequality diverts our attention from a real problem. The real problem being poverty. Second, people can be unequal persistently, and yet perfectly equal if we look at them over time. Third, inequality ignores completely half of the economy by focusing on dollars, not goods and services. And then finally, when we're done, equality isn't necessarily good anyway. So, myth number 3 is, we understand inequality, and the fact is, most of us actually don't. We confuse it for, equality exists at one point in time for equality that actually is much less over time. And at the end, we actually end up thinking equality is necessarily good, when in fact, it may not be. Thanks for watching. Check out our previous video on biggest myth about taxes.